Hello everyone, hope everybody's having a nice Wednesday evening. We're back after a few weeks off. It'll just be me tonight. Connor can't make it, but we'll have a great show regardless. I'm gonna add one audio source that I forgot to add. Of course, there's always something. And actually, I might already have it here. Let's see. Does that work? No, I think that's the wrong one. The show already. Let's see. All right, so that should work. Now I'll do a little bit of playing just to open up things up. There we go. So at least one of you probably recognize that. So this week I kind of wanted to introduce a new segment where we have people play, and so that etude you're going to hear a little bit later from someone who submitted. So I'll drop that link in the chat. I think this should be the right link. So this is a Google Docs or Google Form rather that I have set up. Let me see if I can put it on screen. Let's see. I should have the technology. Nope, that's not the right thing. Let's see here. Let's not worry about it. We'll assume that you'll be able to check out that link for yourself. So essentially, it's just a Google form, and you send your email and upload a video to YouTube and tell me a little bit about yourself and what you're doing this piece or etude or whatever for. Once Connor is back, probably next week we're gonna do a Low Brass U Studio Class Episode 1. So it's gonna start being in an actual series. And it's going to be called Low Brass U Studio Class. So the idea is to, somewhat simulate a studio class that you might get at a university setting or something along those lines. So, to simulate that as best we can over the internet, I thought it'd be nice to have people play, and then I can talk a little bit, Connor can talk a little bit, and if that person is online, maybe they can say some things about what they were, how they were working on it. So let's just go ahead and jump right into that segment. So let me get this pulled up here. Let's do this one. This one actually has the correct audio sources, unlike the other one. But now I can't get it to play. Once. There we go. So let's take just a little bit of that and kind of dissect that. So if you're following along at home, that's this Coproj 19. I'm going to take my headphones out. That's Coproj 19 that Troy sent in. And Troy, I believe, is in the 8th grade. I lost my Google form here now. Troy is... Yes, in the 8th grade, and this is for the Texas Eastman Tuba competition. So if you haven't heard of that, it's unfortunately a little bit too late. But the competition is to hopefully get someone in the state of Texas a tuba. So it's a really cool competition. I really wish that there was something along those lines when I was in middle school or high school. I definitely would have been very excited about the potential of winning an instrument. So we'll dissect this a little bit, and so one of the big things that I think about with this etude, and it might change a little bit depending on what I'm using this etude for. In this case, it's for this competition, and I assume, but I'm not eligible, so I haven't looked at the details of the competition. But I assume not everyone is working on the same etude. I assume you can send in mostly whatever you want. And so in that case, there are all these capital V's in this etude, and those V's are generally considered to be breath marks, and I think that they're well-intentioned breath marks, but I don't know if they're always what makes the most sense and what is always the most helpful. So kind of in this case, I might choose personally to not disregard the breath marks, but I would probably be choosing, to do what I thought was best, not necessarily exactly what's on the page. So if you give me a second here, I'm going to put this on screen. And I should have checked this before, but I did not. So we're going to, not that either. There we go. And I'll resize it. So hopefully you can see that kind of okay. So yeah, we have all these little V's here, and those V's are intended to be breath marks, but they're not always in what I would consider to be the best of places. To me, a lot of these breath marks kind of are in the spots where you're in between tension and release, and I don't really want to break up that tension to release with a breath there. So there are a few instances where I probably would move these breath marks a little bit later. So that's a big thing that I would be thinking about first off the bat, is just, maybe I don't have to do exactly what's on the page in sort of that regard. My kind of philosophy when it comes to etudes is that I'm always trying to bring the music to life. And if it's, it really always depends on the context. If you're playing this for an all-region etude, I might stick a little bit closer to what's on the page. But in this kind of example, I think we have a lot of flexibility, and I would always go with what I think sounds the best in that sort of instance. So, I'm with this etude, it says it's in common timer 4/4, but it's really in 8 and not really in 4. And so I think a couple of the things to think about is to make sure that we're really, really counting through all of this, because it can be pretty tricky. And even for me, when I was reading it just a second ago, there were a couple moments where I was a little bit tripped up by the rhythms. So that's the first thing that I would try to solve. I think in music, everyone has their own kind of priorities of what they think the most important thing is. Someone might say that your sound is the most important thing, or your time is the most important thing, or your intonation is the most important thing. At the end of the day, they're all important things. But most of those things, to me, aren't black and white, where rhythm kind of is. With intonation or tuning, it's like, if you're flat, I'm sharp, which one's right? Are we both wrong? All of those sorts of things are possible. And there are multiple tuning systems. There's so much going on with tuning. But with rhythm, yes, we can stretch things. We can add some rubato and, do some other things. But I would really think about making sure we're really ironing out these rhythms, and the spots that I noticed that were happening the most, that were the biggest problems, were the long notes. And that's a really common thing. Long notes are really where we all kind of struggle, because our brain kind of goes to sleep for a second. We're not thinking about anything. So make sure that we're really thinking about how many of these eighth note pulses go into things. So right at the top, we have a quarter note tied to a 16th note. So we should have 2 full clicks and then start a third, and then we have those triplets. So I'm really, really always focusing on making sure that my rhythm is really, really solid throughout all of that. So that's definitely something that I would first try to iron out and make sure that I'm always just really, really dialed into the rhythm. And this one isn't necessarily simple. So kind of the next thing that I would probably be thinking about with this is what some of these words mean. So right off the top, we have espressivo and dolce. So probably most everyone knows what espressivo means, and being expressive. Dolce maybe not everybody knows what that means, and so dolce means sweet or sweetly. So we don't necessarily think about the tuba as being the sweetest of the instruments necessarily, but I think we can try to really dial that in and make that kind of show that. So I would be thinking about really, really, trying to play with our best sound and really trying to have a nice flow to all of this. So another thing, Troy, that I think that you could probably think about a little bit more is your varying articulations. So one of the things that you tended to do was, if there was a slur or phrase marking, everything was slurred, which isn't necessarily wrong, but I might point you to some of the instances where there are slurs or other phrase markings underneath a larger phrase marking. So I would make sure that I'm really kind of dialed into what I might do to bring that out. So you might see these big phrase markings and assume slurs, and slurs aren't necessarily the wrong thing to do, but we might think about tonguing in there to bring in the smaller groupings and everything. And we didn't get this far in the recording, but the staccatos underneath the phrase markings, another thing that you kind of blew through, that I'd really like to hear some kind of variation. So that's definitely a lot to think about with this etude, but you have a really good start on it so far, and I know that with that competition, you've got a few more months to kind of polish everything. So that's definitely a good start to it, and you've got a lot of the notes and most of the rhythms figured out, but I'd just be really mindful that we're really, really accurate on those rhythms. So yes, if you want to be kind of featured like this, I think this is going to be a segment that'll be, I hope it's fun for people to do and send in submissions. My goal is to, uplift and to not make it a scary thing. So because we're all on our own little journeys with playing and everything. So this will hopefully be a new segment that is somewhat common that we'll do, but it's kind of up to all of you. So if you want to hear yourself, or if you want to get some feedback on your playing, that's a really, really good way to do it. And I hope that it's not too difficult. There's some guidelines that I kind of put in the Google form, but essentially what I'm kind of thinking is about a minute worth of music, and ideally it's something that's in the public domain, which if you don't really know what that means, if it's an etude, it probably is. If it's an excerpt, it probably is also. If it's a solo, it's probably not. So it basically has to do with time period. Copyright laws are very complicated, but just from a YouTube sense, it's really helpful if we don't have to deal with the copyright stuff. So that'd be really helpful, and I'll also probably prioritize the people who send in things that are not public or in the public domain and not copywritten anymore. So really, a lot of etudes and excerpts are kind of the things that we're looking for in this sort of submission. So we'll keep this segment as long as there's someone who's emailing in or sending in into the Google form. So I think that'll be fun for everybody. I might do a little bit more playing, and again, feel free to ask some questions. I know it's an off week without Connor here, but you're still free to ask any questions that you might have. Let's see here. Let's see here. Is this not, maybe I didn't. Trying to put a comment on screen. Oh, there it goes. Oh, that's not the one I wanted. Or is it the one I wanted? Yeah, so just talking about some of the markings that that were kind of not always there. And yeah, that's definitely, we have to work in those sorts of things. My kind of approach with trying to make sure that I'm really kind of dialed in with those details is just to go as slow as I need to make sure I have every kind of detail covered. So, feel free to do things in smaller sections. And yeah, you said that, you've got some time with this. I think you said you have till September. Oh, excuse me. So, you've got some time to kind of get in a lot of the details. But yeah, really bringing the dynamics to life, I think, is another thing that I would really want to hear. I think that especially when we're playing a monophonic instrument, meaning we only play one note at a time, which is every brass instrument essentially. Even if we have the world's greatest sound, even if we're have the greatest execution of everything, if we're not necessarily playing, we're not having contrast, it's probably not going to be exciting, and that just similar sound all the time is really going to start to get kind of old. So that's definitely one of those things that I would be thinking about, that I think that all of us could do a better job of, is just really making sure we have all of our dynamics, every crescendo and decrescendo that can be heard, and also that we add some that maybe aren't there to make it more exciting. I always think of music as an auditory thing first, so it's something we hear, which is oddly somewhat debated, but for the most part I think people would agree with that, and it has to be fun to listen to. So sometimes we have to add some dynamics and things like that to kind of make things a little bit more interesting. But yeah, we might visit this etude and this performance again when Connor is back next week. And that'll be Low Brass U Studio Class Episode 0. So look forward to seeing that, I believe, next week. I'll have a stream next week regardless, but I think that'll be our kind of first episode, which will have a few other kind of features along with that I think will be kind of fun for everyone. And then I guess another thing that, another housekeeping thing that I could mention is just that we're on Low Brass U, the channel itself, I'm committing to doing a video a day. So we'll count the live stream as one of those videos. But yeah, so a video a day, and I'm still somewhat working on the schedule to get that kind of finalized with my own self and, my own video editing skills and all of those sorts of things. So, but my basic plan is to always have like 4 performances a week, being each of the main low brass instruments. So 1 tenor trombone, 1 bass trombone, 1 euphonium, 1 tuba. Have those be 4 performances. Probably, generally speaking, they're going to be etudes, at least starting out. What I've started so far this week is starting with the etude books that are being used for the TMEA etudes, and I'll use those and just kind of go work through them, and I might jump around once they release the actual etudes. But I think I'm going to stick with those books because I like all of those books, and I know them decently well, except for probably the bass trombone one I don't know quite as well. So I'll be working through those and posting an etude a week for each instrument. So that's 4 videos plus the live stream, that's 5. And then so for the other 2, my kind of thinking is that one of those will be, a very specific like teaching thing. So like, let's say, how to clean your trombone, or how to oil this valve, or how to lubricate your slide, something along those lines. Or teaching a specific excerpt or something like that, but something where it's kind of a talking head video where I'm kind of teaching or showing you some sort of concept. So if anyone has any pressing thoughts about those, anything that you kind of are really interested about that you maybe can't find as much information on the internet as you'd like, those sorts of things are definitely things that I'm hoping to cover. My goal in general with the channel is to essentially give people what I hoped I could have found on the internet when I was maybe less experienced. Not that I have all the answers by any stretch, because I definitely don't. I'm still learning, and I think anyone who tells you that they have all the answers most certainly does not. So I'm definitely still learning, various things. I by no means know everything, but I've got, at least some education and some real world experience that I think I can kind of contribute to. So, because when I was in school, YouTube was just becoming a thing, and there wasn't much on there in the ways of educational content or even just content about low brass instruments in general. So my kind of goal is to demonstrate some things and show some things that I would have wanted to know, and maybe some mistakes that I made along the way. Like, just an example of something I can think of is, I bought the wrong mute one time and then didn't return it fast enough and ended up being out of money, and theoretically that's something that I could help someone else avoid. So that's kind of the overall concept of the channel. I don't know that I've ever kind of come out and said that. But so that's, we've got up to the 6th of the videos, and then for the 7th, kind of thinking that being a catch-all, maybe that'll be an additional live stream or something, or I was thinking maybe doing some product reviews. I know that's maybe not the sometimes people really like that stuff, sometimes people hate it. But, I thought that might be something that could be fun to do. I don't know that that'll really include instruments necessarily, because that's kind of a complicated thing it's just not that simple to do. But I was kind of thinking, doing just various things, like maybe talking about my experience with a specific valve oil, a specific, any sort of other lubricant, or, a trombone stand, a tuba stand, or, a mute or something like that. Those are kind of all the things that I was thinking about. But I think that seventh day, really could be anything. I kind of think about it as being a potpourri sort of day. So just kind of anything that might or could happen. So that's kind of the news right now. So it's, today's the third day in a row of being a video every day. But that's where we're at right now. So tomorrow will be either euphonium or bass trombone. I haven't totally finished either one. So, but it'll be euphonium, bass trombone, Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday will be some sort of talking head video, most likely. So if anyone has any video ideas, and keep the comments coming on the videos. Those are always helpful for me to kind of gauge what you all might be interested in. But if there aren't any more questions, and it's kind of a shorter stream today, but I thought I'd maybe call it there. And we'll hopefully see everyone back next week for Low Brass U Studio Class Episode 0. All right, I'll see everyone later.